I need to fix something here. I don't know how it got so broken, but I can't keep going around and around in circles. Something that you really had said, I think on a podcast that really resonated was so many people take this to the grave with them. And for me, that really resonated was like, oh my goodness, if I've been doing this for 2 decades, I'm in my mid-40s, I could honestly see myself still doing it 20 years later.
What's going on, friends? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Dieting from the Inside Out. Because as you know, we cannot go within and then live without. As James Allen once said, we have to do the inner work if we want the things on the outer work, like our weight loss and our nutrition and our fitness and all that, to actually work. If you're new here, my name is Jared Hamilton, and I'm so stoked that you're in the house today. This is going to be a really, really cool episode for you, because in today's episode, I wanted to give you an actual real life example of how to stop quite literally like 20 years of diet struggles and in about 4 to 6 months. That's the thing is, it's interesting. We all talk about how weight loss is slow and how progress is slow. I'm actually not fully convinced it's slow. I actually think weight loss can be actually in full context quite fast. It's just not Amazon Prime. That's the way that I like to word it. Because if you think about it, like what we're going to get into it is an amazing human named Beth. And in today's episode, that's what we're going to show you is how we were able to take and how she was able to change her entire 20 years of binge eating and struggle and bullshit around dieting. And in like 4 to 6 months, like completely 180 her life and end all of the struggle, where she doesn't need help anymore, where she is completely transformed and she has successfully been dieted from the inside out. Because the reality is, if you think about that context right there, 20 years of struggle and in 4, 5, 6 months, gone. That is very fast. It's just not Amazon Prime. That's where most people go wrong with weight loss. They think it's going to be like Amazon Prime, 2-3 days and I should be good. But once we look at the context of everything, weight loss can actually be quite fast. Now, in this episode is really cool because we're going to actually take you through our client, Beth. Beth just graduated our program, because one of the things that we do very differently in the world of coaching is we do not look to have what I call career clients. I'll be honest with you. We see a lot of coaches who like competitors and other colleagues and things like that own other coaching businesses, and they have what I would label as a career client, someone who's been with someone for that many years. And there's the one thing where if someone just wants to have the support and accountability, but when someone needs a coach for 5 years, 6 years, like that makes me wonder if the coach is actually that good at their job. If I'm just being honest with you, because a good coach should teach you a set of skills and to get you results to get to a point where you don't need them anymore. And that's one of the things that I take great pride in that we do inside 180 Impact, is that's what we do for our clients. Now, of course, there are going to be people who just want to have the extra support and just don't want to not have a coach. But the goal is to ultimately graduate our clients. And that's exactly what we did with Beth. And I just think it hits home a little bit more when you hear someone who has gone through the trenches of struggle. In Beth's case, she literally went through 20 years of struggle, has binge eaten for the past 20 years, struggled with weight loss and trendy dieting and yo-yoing and all this stuff for the past 2 decades. And in like 4, 5, 6 months, her life has totally been changed, and she's doing some crazy stuff. So I wanted to get her on with Coach Grant. You guys love Coach Grant. With Coach Grant, because he's the one that's been in the trenches with her and just kind of showing you and using her as almost an object lesson to show you on things that you can do to maybe end some of your struggle around this stuff. It's going to be dope. Now, before we get into all of that, I do want to have a big thank you to the sponsors of the show. Sponsor number 1 is Flex Pro Meals. You guys know me. I love my Flex Pros. And just because at the end of the day, most of our lives all operate out of convenience. If something is not convenient, we're ultimately not going to do it. At the end of the day, for most people, I should say. The question is like, do you need a meal prep company? Do you need something like that? Of course not. You don't need it. But in so many cases, it just makes sense, right? Like if you're someone who has an unpredictable schedule, who spends a lot of time in drive-thrus or stopping at the gas station, things like that, having a company like FlexPro, for example, in your fridge is going to save you a shit ton of money, because you can't go through a drive-thru without spending, $8, $9, $10, $12, $13, $14, $15 on a meal. But then it's also going to save you time in the drive-thru. It's going to be in line for your goals. You're going to know the exact macros and calories. The food's made by a chef. It's really good for you. It's high protein, and it's going to just help your situation a lot, especially during unpredictable times. So That's why I love them. It's why I use them personally. If you are into that sort of thing or would like to just see kind of what they have to offer, just check the link below or go to flexpromeals.com and use my code HamiltonTrained, and it'll save you an additional 20% at checkout, which I think is pretty cool. Second sponsor, it is First Form. I actually don't have on a First Form shirt today. I usually always do. This is my festive as fuck shirt. I told my wife I wanted a t-shirt that looks like an ugly Christmas sweater that says festive as fuck or festive AF. And she found one on Etsy, because Etsy is amazing, and she got it for me. So anyway, so if you're not watching the YouTube video, come check out my festive as fuck shirt. But anyway, First Form, it's absolutely fantastic when it comes to the supplement game. And that's the thing, guys. You know I'm not a big supplement pusher. Do they have their time and their place? Absolutely. They're meant to fill holes and gaps that you're not getting with food. Are supplements the end all be all? No. But the truth is very few people are actually filling all of the gaps in their nutrition just in general. Most people are not eating the recommended 4 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Most people have a really hard time hitting their protein intake or having a hard time hitting their protein intake without going over on calories. Most people have all these vitamin and mineral deficiencies because they're not eating enough whole foods to make that happen. Most people's digestion is wrecked. Most people have inflammation in their joints, all these kind of things. And if you're just be honest, if you're not filling those gaps with food, then we need to fill it with something else. But the beautiful thing about First Form is you're being taken care of. The products are accurate and they're safe, and it's an actual company. It's not just someone selling their supplements on Amazon for pennies on the dollar because they're making it in their basement and lying on what's on the label. So that's the thing I love about First Form. I take their stuff. I am the biggest fan of how they treat their people, their culture, everything from the CEO down to the people packaging the products. So that's there as well. They're a sponsor of the show, and I'm so stoked about it. I do have a link below where you can get some free priority shipping, but just hit the link down there, no code or anything. Just use the link below, and they know you're coming from the show. And then you get taken care of on that front. I also have some other resources for supplements down there if you're like, I'm not sure what to take or what the deal is with that, but that's down there as well. But anyway, enough of me talking. Let's get on to today's show. I know you're going to love it. I will talk to you in just a second. Well, I appreciate both you guys doing this. Beth, I apologize about the mix-up last time. Did I tell you how that played out? Like why that got all fucked up?
Yes. And I heard, I was listening to Beth's episode yesterday. So it was so funny because then you caveated it and you said, supposed to be speaking to a client, Beth, and I'm like, oh, that's me.
Yep. So I don't know if I told you, Grant, but it was an anomaly. I just put in when I scheduled with Beth Farraco, the last episode of the show. I just put podcast with Beth. I saw that. Yeah, I just put podcast with Beth. And I immediately, like a week goes by and I thought it's this Beth. I thought it was you, like Beth Hawking. And so that's when I messaged you. I'm like, we have a podcast today? And you go, not that I know of. And I'm like, oh shit. Well, I probably just had a Jared moment and I just messed up or whatever. And it turns out like, then I get a message from Beth. She's like, yo, are we not doing our show? And I was like, oh no. Cause like, that's the other thing. Beth is a big deal. Like, not that like we should treat people differently, whether they're a big deal in the fitness world or not, but like Beth like a month ago was fighting for the #1 spot on iTunes. Like she was head to head with Mind Pump on her show. Like it was a huge thing. And I just ghosted her like a piece of shit. So, but she was gracious enough to reschedule and was not an ass at all. She was great. Right. Right. So this is why I'm always trying to stack good karma points, because I know I'm going to have to cash them in at some point. But anyway, so the right Beth Hawking, how are you? How's everything in London and in your neck of the woods?
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, really good. We're just saying it's we're feeling a little bit of a chill in the air. The temperature's dropping. We're coming from autumn into winter, but I love this season. I don't know about you guys. For me, I feel like it's totally like that kind of Christmas holidays. You've just had Thanksgiving. There's a really nice kind of feel to this season.
Oh yeah. Jared is the king of Christmas. He loves this time of year.
100%.
I live for Thanksgiving and like fall, but once it comes wintertime, I'm not so much into it.
I don't know how people have warm Christmases. Like people who live in Florida, where I can't picture palm trees and Christmas trees, like, or 80, 90 degrees, sunny day, shorts and t-shirt and tank top weather and Christmas. My brain doesn't compute it. So that's just me though. So, But I apologize. I am a little bit under the weather. So you've got congested Jared today, and then I don't know why I couldn't get to sleep till like 4 this morning. Like I just yeah. So so a little puffier than normal today. The voice is a little bit deeper, but hey, we're doing this. So Beth, so that's the big reason that we wanted to get you on the show, because we've been talking about this for a while, right? And is just because you've had such a transformative journey with all of your stuff. And I just think the people that listen to the show, hearing your story and your journey is going to resonate a lot, because I think so many people are stuck at where you used to be. And in the grand scheme of things, a relatively short period of time, so many things have 180'd for you. But a lot of times I always say, when someone like Grant or I comes on the show and teaches us stuff, there's a level of people who won't resonate because we don't have ovaries, right? Or it's because we aren't a woman going through this, or we may not have been in the exact shoes that someone else has been in. So I think it's really, really important to have someone on who has been in the exact shoes that so many people are in and kind of shared their story and everything. It just seems to help a lot of people. So let's get into a little bit of that. Like, where were things like before coaching, before all of this? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. And maybe I just caveat that by telling everyone how old I am as well, because I feel like it isn't just for people in the 20s and the 30s. I'm in my 40s, so 42, and have been struggling with body image and body fat for probably 2 decades, without a lie. And yes, I would make some progress, and obviously realized, I wasn't doing things sustainably, because obviously I wasn't able to keep it off. And, that hence the kind of 2 decade later, I'm having a chat with you guys saying, hey, I need to fix something here. I don't know how it got so broken, but I can't keep going around and around in circles with something. And I loved what you said, Jared. Something that you really had said, I think on a podcast, that really resonated was, so many people take this to the grave with them and never get it fixed. And for me, that really resonated, was like, oh my goodness, if I've been doing this for 2 decades, I'm in my mid-40s, I could honestly see myself still doing it 20 years later, and having that kind of just like all of that mental stuff going on that I can now free my mind of.
Yeah.
Because it's not like full of all the things that we're kind of beating ourselves up about. So yeah, that really resonated. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons that I kind of reached out and realized that you understood what I had gone through for 2 decades of, let's say, kind of yo-yo dieting, binge eating. And now I know what that secret sauce was.
So for you though, so I'm curious, and I love that. I think that's such a huge point to realize, is when you said, "Oh shit, I might take this to the grave with me," like that reality check. I think a lot of people don't realize what's at stake. I think a lot of times I always say we don't think at scale. You know what I mean? We think about just right now or the next like couple years, but we don't think like at scale, or we only think at scale with our other areas. Like we think about investments, 401ks, retirement, buying a home versus leasing a home, or all these things, our job. We think about those things at scale. Like, oh, I should probably get into a serious career and work my way through the corporate ladder. Or, oh, I should probably set up a retirement account because I'm not going to want to work when I'm 80. We think at scale in all these other areas, but too often with our struggles right now, we don't think at scale. So I love that you flipped on that side of your brain to go, oh shit, if I don't get this together, I really might die with these things. Because in the grand scheme of things also, like, how long has it been? Like 5-6 months, something like that?
Yeah, we just finished 6 months.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I always say people, so for those listening, like Beth is graduating our program, right? This is the whole point of the coaching program, is where we don't coach you for the rest of your life. Like everyone, like, yes, like some people take longer than 6 months or whatever the case is. But the goal is, we always tell people, you come in between 6-12 months later. For most people, that should be it. Like, I've never understood coaches who have career clients. I'll be talking to a colleague and he's like, yeah, I've coached Mrs. Jones for 4 years. And I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Like, you're not teaching the skills, you know what I mean? That just shows how good of a student you've been, Beth, and how good of a teacher, Grant, you have been, with all of these
Beth,
things.
You were a really quick study. I think you were good to go in like 4 months.
Right. But with all of that being said, though, I always say the progress is fast. If we look at perspective, it's just not Amazon Prime. Right. We think fast progress. We think like 2 days. Right. But if you said 2 decades of struggle, 20 years of struggle, in 6 months, it was gone, like gone. Not like we lost a little bit of weight. We're talking about like the binge eating's done. The guilt around food is gone. The sabotage is gone. And you being able to go carry on these things by yourself now and have what we call freedom is there. So that's a huge testament to you, Beth, about implementing these things. I'm curious from your perspective, Beth, what was the shift for you? Like, once you got in this, like, was it for you? Like, do you feel like it was a slow growth where you're like, no, yeah, I used to struggle, and then one day I realized I haven't struggled anymore? Or was there like a shift, like a moment where you're like, holy fuck, that's the secret sauce, in your opinion?
Like, I don't want to say that I was the perfect student and, all of a sudden
you can absolutely say that. Like, come on now.
It definitely took some time. And I still had my wobbles, like Grant will tell you. I still had plenty of things that I was stressing about. And I think it's that conditioning as well. When you're so used to having a wobble when you see the scale go up, that you make it to mean something. And having kind of Grant by my side and in my pocket and every week reassuring me that these things are normal, it kind of started to become an ingrained, a reconditioning, if you like. But definitely the secret sauce was when I applied what you were both teaching about mindset, right? So I am also a coach, but a different kind of coach. And I think when I had dug into mindset, I hadn't applied it to dieting and fat loss. And when I realized that they could overlap, or that they could actually be applied in the same way, it was the mindset piece that I had been missing for 20 years that I hadn't ever applied to what I was doing with my body and my body image. And that for me was mind blowing when I really understood.
That's huge. Do you think this is, because for context for those, and you can elaborate on this as well, Beth, kind of a little plug for you as well, because Beth is a leadership and mindset coach for high achieving women, right? Like, that's what you would classify like what you do as?
Absolutely. Yeah, correct.
So for you, have you noticed this is helping that area now that like this hole has been filled? Have you noticed this is bleeding into your ability to show up more in the capacity that you do for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm always working on my mindset, right? And, for you guys that know, the study is never done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, there is always that journey. It's a never-ending one. You get to fall in love with the process, which is something, that Grant has also been working with me on in terms of, that fat loss process and putting those habits in place. So I think for me, just translating it across the two different areas was something that I'd kept so separate before. And now all of a sudden it was like, oh, mic drop, right?
Yeah.
And it really did, both of the areas were like, oh, this is the same stuff. Yeah. And it's totally relevant to both, my career and helping other women and, my mental side and helping me through this process as well. Absolutely mind blowing, but so obvious, yet it was like hidden in plain sight, if you like.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think we see all of these things, and I think we have a tendency to look at everything through the lens of everything being mutually exclusive, right? Where it's everything in its own containers, if you will. But when in reality, we're talking about almost like a pond, right? You might have these areas in the pond, but everything's still in water, right? Grant, from your perspective, where do you think it started to shift for her, right? Because this is the fascinating thing, in my opinion, about coaching is we see someone. Like, it's why the program's called 180 Impact, because we're 180ing all these areas in people's lives. It's the whole reason for the name. But it's one of those things where some people, it's like a slow growth where it's almost like if you were to say, Jared, at what moment did you love your wife, right? When I met Shelby, I didn't love her. I love her now. I don't know a moment where I go, that was the second I fell in love with my wife. So some people, their progress is like that. It's like watching hair grow out. But some people have this huge boom where it like, that was the emotional impact or the shift. So Grant, from the coaching perspective, what are your thoughts on that, where that started to shift from your perspective of Beth?
No, I think it was definitely like a slow and steady stream of, and Beth, you can probably, remember a lot of this too, but, at the start, there were all these, questions and like, Grant, I'm concerned that this is happening. I'm concerned that this is happening. What am I going to do here? What am I going to do there? And, there was kind of that slow evolution where you would still say, hey, Grant, this happened, but I remember that, this, and this. So it was kind of, you starting to kind of, fill that role of like, answering that question for yourself, having that confidence in yourself and what you're doing. And I think that that's where I really kind of saw that shift, where it was like, you might have had maybe an off week due to travel or an off week due to whatever it might be. And maybe there was something that, happened on the scale. Well, eventually you got to a point where it was like, the things that I would have said, you were already starting to say. So it was just kind of, I think, having that confidence in yourself that, hey, the stuff that we're doing, the stuff that you've been doing, it really is working. So I think that that was kind of the shift for me. It's once you started to really have that confidence in yourself with a lot of that stuff.
I love that. Well, and that's where a lot of the independence comes in, right? So it's like, if you think of like a child getting parented, at what point does the handoff happen from where it goes, they're completely dependent on mom to they're completely independent? So where's that shift happen? And I think that's the magic sweet spot inside coaching, where someone goes from dependent on coach to independent, where they start filling in those gaps, right? Where Beth goes, no, Grant, you would probably say this. And where it's like, okay, here's the problem. No, but I know you're going to tell me this. And I think that's where so much of the transcending happens. Beth, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm smiling a little bit when you said about kind of having a lifelong career coach. Like, I would love to have Grant forever and ever, because it was just such a dream to kind of have that two-way conversation and just to kind of have a bit of reassurance. But at the end of the day, it was Grant who kind of said, hey, listen, you are actually ready. Off you go. And I was like, oh, maybe I should stay. And maybe I'm going to manifest some extra coaching from you guys. And you're a bit like, yeah, you don't really need it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. So it is just having that kind of reassurance, and accountability is huge, obviously, when you're trying to do something like that. But yeah, I definitely would have loved to have carried on working with you, Grant, forever.
Yeah. No, and it's one of those things too, where, like I definitely think, like, honestly, about month 4 is when I was like, yeah, you know what, you're pretty much good to go. I'm pretty sure that no matter what, situation life throws at you, you'll be able to, conquer it. And I guess a better way of saying that earlier is it's once you started to use the tools on your own, right? It's once you really started to, take those tools and apply them to, all the situations and, where you were, faced with adversity, you were able to overcome that. And again, that's where a lot of that. So it's, once you start seeing them use those tools and this and that, it's like, okay, you probably don't need me anymore. You're good. You can get out of the nest. You can start flying on your own.
Yeah. Well, so I want to interject on that, because this is the magic sweet spot is, and this is for me the difference between an amateur and a professional in terms of like what Beth is doing, where everyone gets the knowledge, right? If I had $1 for every time someone said, I know exactly what to do, I just don't do it. But the difference, Beth, what you have done is you've taken that knowledge and you fucking ran with it. You're what I would call a professional executor. This is why I love working with high performing entrepreneurs and other coaches, is because most, not all, most of the time, people like us are all professional executors. I pride myself on being the best client, right? I always have a mentor on whatever I'm working with. And I pride myself on me being the best client ever because I'm a professional executor. I get my coach the best results possible and I execute flawlessly. It's something that I take a lot of pride in myself, and I can tell you do the same thing, Beth. But that's why the change is happening, is because a lot of the action, like getting the knowledge is easy. Between listening, it's easy to listen to seminars, it's easy to listen to coach, it's easy to absorb information. But I always say inner work is 2 parts: new information, which is what we're talking about, but then really uncomfortable action. And the only way to have this kind of transformative journey like you've had is you have had to go through periods of not just action, but really uncomfortable action. Like when you were scared to eat more, having you eat more. When you were feeling guilty around food causing the binge, well, we're going to have that food every fucking day. And it's like, oh my gosh, but you trusted the process and you uncomfortably executed. And then it's the only way this happens on the other side, like it has. But that's why, because we always say there's three things that if you give us, we'll give you a new life. And it's the three big pieces we look for in clients. It's a student, like the picture perfect student, willing to learn, willing to be explorative, willing to just gather the new information. Then number two, someone who's willing to unlearn. Right? We all have these preconceived notions and these ideologies we already have. We have to unlearn those. That's what's arguably most uncomfortable. And then someone who's coachable, someone who's willing to take feedback, someone who's willing to course correct and adjust. And the fact that you've had that perfect little triad, which is why you've had like the most transformative 6 months from the past 20 years, is because the ball was in your court and you took massive ownership over that ball in your court, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think, I'm very much the same as you, Jared, like the perfect student. Like I have a number of different coaches as well for various different reasons. And I think coaches obviously see the value in coaching. And, you know, for me, my advice to anybody would be to go all in on what you're learning. Like, especially, you know, if you're given free stuff, that's great. And if you can do it with free stuff, fantastic. Right. And, you know, kudos to you. But if you're going to pay for something, and generally something that you pay for, you're going to take more seriously. Mm-hmm. And you have to go all in. And it would be really stupid of me to come to you after 20 years and go, hey, I actually know everything. You can't teach me anything new. I've just paid for 6 months of coaching. So suck it up, Grant. What are you going to do about it? Right? I mean,
you'd be surprised, Beth. You would be surprised. Yeah. Our process eliminates a lot of that, but you would be surprised at every now and then something like that will actually happen. And we have to have a come to Jesus conversation where it's like, look, there's a reason you're not where you want to be, and you just gave me, you know, X amount of dollars because you don't know it all. But like, that's the thing is people, I always hated it until I got into business when people said that, but people who pay attention. But for me personally, I agree with that more than anything from my own habits, right? In the past 6 years, I actually had someone ask me the other day how much I've invested in other coaches. And I'm not to sound like an egotistical asshole. I've invested around $100,000 in the past 5 years in mentorship. One person has gotten 50,000 of those dollars, like in one coach, is the most scary thing I've ever done. But to say like I took that more seriously than if he would have coached me for free, or these other mentors coached me for free. I mean, think about it. We even see this when, I don't know about in London, but like if someone is like over here, if someone's selling a dog, they want to get rid of a dog, they always say, don't give the dog away. You need to sell that puppy, because people who have ill intentions, who are not going to take care of that puppy, are not going to pay several $100s for it. People who abuse animals are going to get it for free. But if you charge $500, $600, $800 for a puppy, someone who's going to abuse it is less likely because they're invested in it now. And it's the same thing here. It blows me away how many people are so willing to spend money on all this other bullshit, but not invest in themselves. And I'm not going to sit here and say some people don't have actual financial issues. I totally respect that. But where I have issues is when they're spending the same amount of money on Starbucks, nails, their 27th pair of shoes, random bullshit from Amazon, and then to tell me, oh, I don't have the money, which is like, again, fine. Like we're not one to pressure people into signing up for coaching, but for me, it just shows where priorities are at. If we just look at the landscape of where someone actually spends their money, because I made a post about this the other day about your money shows priorities. If you look at my bank account, I spend a lot of money in coaching. I spend a lot of money on my marriage because I prioritize my marriage. I spend a lot of time on my money on my mental health, right? And it just shows where we go. I spend a lot of money on my staff and my business because it just shows where priorities are at. So for those listening, whether you ever sign up for coaching or not, which is not the point of this, is if you were to just audit your finances and see what percentage of your money goes to different places, it shows black and white your priorities. So, I'm curious. So Beth, for you, what was the biggest hurdle in all of this, the landscape of this last 6 months? What was the biggest hurdle for you? The biggest, hardest one to overcome?
Actually, that's probably quite easy. Actually, there's probably two. One was eating more. Eating more blew my mind. And Grant, just a little update for you. I'm doing a reverse diet, as you know, and I'm still losing weight. And I wanted to drop that in because you guys get that. But there will be plenty of people listening who are like,
wait,
no.
You're a middle-aged woman eating more calories and losing weight? Dear God, what kind of sorcery are you on?
Exactly. So probably eating more. Although, I mean, I don't know, Grant will probably have a different opinion. Like probably a few months in, realizing that eating more was really beneficial for my physique and for feeling great in the gym and loads of energy, and my lifts have all gone up. And there's just nothing bad about eating more. I mean, there's only good stuff. So I think that's probably was the biggest hurdle, certainly at the beginning. And I kept saying, Grant, it's too much food, and too many calories, and I'm putting on weight. And it's a mind fuck basically at the beginning, and then you have to kind of realize what else is benefiting. It's not just about the scales. And I think, if I was allowed a second one, it would be the scales tracking up, which is really hard to deal with if you've been dieting for 20 years and wanting to make yourself smaller and wanting to see a lower number on the scale. And without understanding, and I think I had knowledge of it, but I didn't have knowledge of me doing it, was that to have the body that we want, we sometimes need to add more calories. We sometimes need to add more muscle. And both of those are going to see the scales shooting up. And I learned a whole ton of other reasons why the scales might shoot up from Grant. And so I stopped freaking out about it. And I chilled out much more about it. And I think there was even, for me, I never really thought about that mind-body connection. So the things that I was doing on a weekly basis, because we had this tracker, I could then see, my curry takeaway that I love to have with my husband, which is our kind of relationship time on a Friday night, that always spiked my weight the next day, regardless of, how much carbs were involved. It was just going to spike my weight, right? So as soon as I figured that out, I stopped freaking out about it, right? And it was just becoming that kind of weekly habit and that weekly pattern. And I was like, right, now I get to project it and understand where it's coming from rather than freak out about it. So that for me was just so eye-opening, that kind of connection of, let's track how things work in the body and not just freak out from a headspace or a mental perspective.
I would definitely agree with that. I think it was, definitely getting that emphasis shifted away from, just what's happening on the scale and, bringing it out, an octave or two to, see what's going on in the whole picture. So yeah, 100% I would agree with that.
So that's the crazy part, or I shouldn't say crazy. The amazing part is that you recognize the emotional meanings that you're attaching in this emotional trigger, but then instead of staying there, we took a step back and we looked at the data. I always say, we always teach this, that we've got to fight emotion with logic and data, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, the scale spiked, but my pants are looser, right? Or like, oh my gosh, I'm eating so much food, but my lifts went up and I lost 3 more inches, or whatever the case is, right? And I think that that's such one of the biggest takeaways people can have with this is we can't always believe everything that we think and feel, right? You felt like it was a lot of calories, but you lost weight. You were in a deficit still. You thought and felt like, oh my gosh, my life is over because the scale spiked. But in reality, you kept losing weight, trending downward in inches and clothes and all of that stuff, right? So where did that for you, was it just looking where it changed? Was it at the data looking where you're like, oh, this is the pattern. Okay, this is normal. Was that where it shifted? Or especially with the eating more, I want to say, because most people who listen to the podcast are petrified of eating more calories, right? It's like they would rather see how many paper cuts they can give themselves versus eat 300 calories more. It blows me away. So for you, when it went from, holy shit, I'm so scared to eat, it doesn't even make sense logically. I eat more and I lose more weight. That doesn't even make sense. Where did that start to shift where you go, oh, this is legit?
Yeah, it's really hard to pinpoint that. But I think just during the whole process of kind of zooming forward to think about what it is that I wanted out of this process and what did I want almost my physique to evolve to and from. And Grant's going to laugh if I give you this example, but Grant gave me such an amazing example. Do you remember talking to me about Marky Mark?
Yes.
Wait, I haven't heard this one yet. I haven't heard this one yet.
This is the best. So
I forgot all about that.
My question was, and this like blew my mind, right? And I was like, Grant. So I started looking back at old pictures of myself. If you've been dieting 20 years, you've generally got quite a few progress pictures, right? So I was like, I look better now, but I've got a higher body fat. I'm like, Grant, what's that about? And how is it possible that I look better now with a higher body fat? Do you want to answer the question like you did?
yeah, sure. No, I don't know why. Why did I choose Mark Wahlberg? Was that just the first thing that I found?
You were Googling some images and he came up, but it was a perfect example.
Well, basically, with the whole premise that I was trying to, kind of get across, and the idea is, an untrained body at a certain body fat percentage is going to look vastly different than a trained body at an equivalent body fat percentage. So I think, one of the ones that I was looking at was, good old Marky Mark, whenever he was, probably sitting around, I don't know, maybe like 22, 24% body fat. And then I found someone with an equivalent body fat percentage that had, likely never really stepped foot in a gym. And it's just night and day how much different they look at. So, the kind of idea there was to not so much worry about, the individual metrics, but again, it's just taking that step back and looking at everything from a big picture, a macro.
Yeah. So then to jump back in to answer the question was that I looked better even though I was heavier and I had a higher or potentially higher percentage of body fat. And to kind of answer the question, which was about what do I want my physique to look like? Well, I want to look like I lift weights, right? I don't just want to go to the gym 4 times a week and, and like look a little bit soft, right? That's not actually what I want to do. So I think that's how it really helped was like, okay, like, I don't think you actually had to spell it out to me, Grant, but it's like, well, how are you going to get these muscles that you really like admire if you're not prepared to eat some more food? So I think it was kind of that slow burn of like, oh, I can't just keep making myself smaller because where are my muscles going to go? And, how is this actually going to benefit me in the long term? So I think kind of that longer term perspective is probably the answer to the question.
That's so good. Beth, you are such a high level thinker. I'm serious. I'm like, it takes so much emotional acuity and awareness to be able to be deep in the shit of a thing you don't want to happen, right? Eating more, scale spiking. And for you to pause, zoom out and go, wait, what do I actually want? Do I want to just be able to brag to my friends I weigh X or why do I want to weigh that? Oh, it's because I want to look like this. That's the true goal. So if I look like X, like what I want to look like, I guess the scale weight is irrelevant. Like that takes such a high level of awareness and high vibrational thinking and emotional acuity to be able to go, wait, zoom out. What do I actually want? What's the whole point of this? What's my decisions made at scale? What do I actually want long-term, not just in this moment? That's a huge thing. Like, and we don't see that very often if we're being honest, right? Most people are caught up in the 2 inches in front of their face, not the forest at hand, right? I've never understood that analogy, by the way, until coaching happened. The whole, we can't see the forest because of the trees because we're like so close to this. It's like a beautiful painting. When you're a foot in front of it, it's ugly, but you take 80 steps backwards and it's a masterpiece. And you're so good at doing that, but in the hardest place possible, which is looking at ourselves and our own stuff. So mad props to you on that. That's a big one. That's super huge.
Thank you. And I think, 20 years of dieting, like, is no joke, right? I mean, I feel like the fix isn't going to happen overnight. I'm not suddenly going to have my Amazon Prime body, right? But at the same time, if it's really taken 20 years, I might as well take another couple of years to figure it out properly, right? And that was where I was coming from. That perspective was I definitely didn't expect it to be fixed in quote unquote commas, in 6 months, but to have a different perspective. That's what I was after for sure.
That's huge. So Grant, from your opinion, from the coach's seat, if we will, other than some of the things that we've talked about already, what do you think that has made Beth so successful in such a short period of time? Because like if people are listening to the show and like, because I like to do these client interviews a lot just to give people hope in the show and showcase what we do and stuff. If we were to look at line up all the most successful clients, we would say every one of them have these characteristics the same, right? But so from your perspective, because you've been the one in the trenches with Beth the past 6 months, what has made her so successful from like the higher level coaching side of things, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you even kind of just touched on it there. It's being able to buy into something, because the short run oftentimes is not going to yield us the results that we want, right? A lot of times it's going to be, the exact opposite. Like, going back to like, the financial investment of coaching, if you were to look at that, well, day one of coaching, you just spent a lot of money, and day one, you don't have any results. So again, if we were to hone in on that, we think, well, we just screwed ourselves. But it's being able to buy in and, use this stuff and really just run with it for a long period of time. Because again, the first time that you were doing a reverse diet, the first month, I mean, hell, that's probably not the results that you wanted. It's not the results that you were expecting, but it's, just, okay, I'm going to trust in the process. I'm going to just, believe in myself, believe in coach, and we're just going to do this for a long period of time. And then, hey, guess what? Eventually you get there. So I think that it's, just again, it's kind of being able to, follow through with something, even though it's a little bit uncomfortable, for a long period of time.
That's so good. Beth, I'm curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this. How did you learn to trust the process? Right? Because that's because we always hear the clickbait, like not clickbait. We hear the term all the time. Oh, you got to trust the process. You got to trust the process. But I don't hear too many people teaching how to trust the process, right? Like it's kind of like saying trust the process is like saying just eat healthy. Like what the fuck does that mean? Or, oh, be more mindful. Like what the fuck does that even mean? But because you've said like you just trusted the process. Grant just talked about trusting the process. Everyone listening knows that you have to trust the process. But when you got into this, fear immediately hit. We had to get you to eat more. We had to get you to get over your scale anxiety. We had to shift all these things that were hammered into your nervous system from the past 20 years of fucked up conditioning. But you were able to trust the process. So I guess my question is, how did you do that? Like, especially for those that are listening who don't trust that they're going through this on their own and they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm petrified of every decision I make. So how did you learn to trust the process?
Yeah. Why did you trust me?
Well, the clue is in the question, actually, Jared, is that I spent 20 years in an unsustainable relationship of something that wasn't working. So in a process that I guess I had made up or figured out that wasn't working, even though I tried and tried and tried again, there was no other option but to trust a new process, right? It's like, what's the definition of insanity? To keep trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. I did that, and I spent 2 decades doing that. And now there's something else out there that definitely works because people do get results. And I want that rather than what I wasn't able to provide for myself.
I love that. So for you, it was very logical. It was like, wow, well, my shit's not working, sure as hell. So for you, it was very logical, it sounds like.
I think so. I think that's what you have to deal with. You said to deal with data, deal with the facts, take the emotion out of it, because otherwise I think you can drive yourself crazy living in your head. But for me, that kind of, as I said, that mind-body connection and understanding factually, understanding calculations, like just the way that Grant broke it down was just so factual. He was very astute and very aware of the emotions that I would have as well. But in terms of, having that just factual breaking it down, he was like, listen, for you to have gained 5 pounds this week, you would have had to have eaten X amount of calories. I know you didn't do that, so let's look at it logically. And he did it in such a nice way that was very reassuring. It wasn't like don't be an idiot. It was very much more of a reassuring, I understand, your feeling. However, let's break it down. So I think that from a very early stage, I had to trust the facts. I had to trust the logic. I had to trust that you knew what you were doing. I mean, you've seen.
Would you say that that's kind of how you overcame those moment of doubts?
Yeah, I think so. Like looking back now, I think there's a lot of it is about that factual inner, like given to you in a really nice, I'm trying to find a really nice analogy. You guys are kings of analogy and I like can't find one when I'm looking for one. Damn. But yeah, in a don't be an idiot. Like it's actually, let's just break it down. And I think that appealed to my nature. As I have been, quite an emotional person around this, thing that I haven't been able to fix. As you said, maybe I'm quite a high level person, but this is something I haven't been able to fix for myself for so long. And it's been something that's been massively frustrating and something that's evaded me or eluded me for so long. I think, there had to be another way. And yeah, I think, Grant, probably you're right, that breaking it down just to be really factual, and here's the data, you can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I was thinking about this the other day. It just hit me. One of the reasons that I think that why this has been so successful, and like if we look at the cases of like why we coach the way that we do, and even in like your case, Beth, specifically with like why this was able to shift so quickly is because we hit the 3 points, right? We don't, because like you said, Grant knew the emotions I was feeling. But then we got into the data, but then there was the physical side, but that's the triad, right? We have to address, like, this is where I think most coaches go wrong. They address it at just physical, just calories, just workouts, and that's it. Or someone addresses it at just mental. But then like, oh yeah, here's the mental strategies, but then they don't take into account the emotional nature of a human, right? Not that like Beth is emotional. No, we as humans are emotional. It's one of the couple things. It's like our emotions and our intellect is arguably the only things that separate us from like dogs, right? So but to understand that we have to address all three: mental, emotional, and physical, because they all influence each other. The physical affects your mental, but then your emotional affects your physical, but then your emotional affects your mental, and then all of it. But I think when we leave out, like if we had a table that had 3 legs, you can't get rid of one of those without the stability of the table falling. And I think when we hit this thing from all 3, mental, emotional, and physical, you're going to have a really sturdy 3-legged table. And I think for those listening, when your table metaphorically becomes unstable, we lose one of those. Grant, what do you think about that? I know I've never talked about that specifically, but I got thinking about that like 2 or 3 days ago. I think that's the key, those 3.
Oh yeah. I mean, you absolutely, I mean, there's no way to have success when you're missing one of the key ingredients. I mean, you can try to, bake a cake, but if you're missing flour, well, I don't even know what that's going to turn out to be, but it's not going to be something great. So, I mean, you've always got to have, all it's just going to be baking soda and some sugar, and maybe that'll make something spectacular, but I don't think it will.
I watched MasterChef till 4 a.m. last night. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Well, and I think that, and to go a step further with that, like, I think that you can probably find short-term success with only having a few components, but I think for you to have genuine long-term success, there's no way to circumvent that. I think that there's just no way around that. You have to have all of the key components for long-term success. I think that you could probably find a way to get short-term success, but long-term, it's just not going to happen.
Well, I would argue there's no such thing as short-term success. Like, Beth, would you be happy if like tomorrow you gained all your weight back and went back to square one? Like you were good for 6 months and then you right. Beth, would you consider that successful?
No, I've been there and I've done that, right? I mean, and it wasn't successful and it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is we have to realize that success is the only way success with this works is long-term. When we're talking years at a time, I don't know anyone that would move into a house when the builder said, yeah, you're good for 6 months and then it's going to cave in on itself. Like we wouldn't do that, or invest in the stock, but then it's going to crash in 3 months. That's not how this works, but it blows me away. I think there's a consciousness around diet culture that temporary success is considered success. I'll ask somebody on a phone call, I'm like, what all have you done that's worked? And they go, I did keto and I lost like 30 pounds and then I gained 45 pounds back. And I go, well, and like, not to sound like an asshole, but in my head, I'm like, no, I asked what you did that worked, not what worked for 30 days. And then you gained more back. Like that's not successful. I think a lot of people, that's why people I think live in that yo-yo dieting cycle, is because they consider a success. They get the dopamine hit. They're like, I lost 30 pounds. I gained 45 back, but I still lost my 30 pounds. And it's like, no, that's why we stay in that cycle. But, man, this has been so good, Beth. I fucking love talking to you, and you've done so well with all of this. I'm so proud of you. Last question, and then we'll sign off. What would you say to someone listening right now who is where you were 6 months ago, 8 months ago, if they're in the same shitty place you were, they've been doing this for years with zero to show for it. They're frustrated. It's costing them a lot in their life. What would you say to someone if they are where you used to be?
I think I would say recognize what's not working and ask yourself honestly if you really want to continue in this spiral. And, if you don't fix it now, where will you be in 10 years' time? And if you're happy with that, fine, carry on. But if you're destined for more in life, sorry, I got goosebumps. If you're destined for more, right, and you want more bandwidth in your brain, that you don't just want to keep thinking about how many calories you're going to eat or how small you can get or how low the number can be on the scale, if that's taking up a lot of your brain power, like, you've got another whole life that you can live without all of that stress in your brain. And if you have got some support with that, even better, as we already kind of touched on, that's not always available for everybody. But, if that is a priority for you, if you want more out of life and you recognize that what you're doing isn't working, and it kind of goes for any area of your life, but certainly, this is about fat loss and weight loss and securing a body image that you're proud of for the rest of your life. I mean, health is the one and only thing that I think you should be investing in. And, if you want a good body for the rest of your life that kind of keeps giving back to you, then this should be something that you're investing in for the long term. And it's never going to be a quick fix because you've tried the quick fix and it didn't work. And I think, the way that you guys work with that mental shift, that mind-body connection, that just making sure that, we didn't even talk about kind of that identity piece, but for me, also really key is that change in identity. And who I was back then is definitely not who I am now. I'm so much happier, so much in a better place. Like, honestly, it's, I feel more relieved. I feel like I've got it sorted. I feel like I could teach it to somebody else. I learned that much, right? It feels like, like do one, teach one. I feel like, oh, here we go, guys. But take the emotions out of it, as we've already talked about. Look at the facts and get some support. There's not really a lot to it. It's, what is the phrase? It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to go all in, if this is really a priority for you, then, there is no other option.
That's huge. That's huge. Thank you. That's so good, Beth. So where can people, I don't normally ask this, but I know with you and like kind of what you're working on, if people want to follow you and connect with you, especially because, there are a lot of people that listen to this are people who would be right up your alley with what you teach and who would benefit from having you in their news feed on their phone. Where can people find you? If they're like, I really like what Beth is about, I'd like to see some of her content and kind of what her perspectives on all this is, especially like leadership and high achievement. Where can people find you at?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jared. That's super kind. So I love to hang out on Instagram. So Jared and I also send each other little memes and messages and love hearts
all
and
the time.
all kinds of things occasionally. So I'm at Meet Beth Hocking. So MEET, as in nice to meet you, not as in meat, as in protein, because that would be weird. So Meet Beth Hocking. And I would love to see you guys and come and hang out. And if you want to chat to me about dieting from the inside out and any of the questions that you might have, I'd also be more than willing to answer those questions over there as well.
I love it. We'll put that in the show notes and stuff to make it easier for people just to click on and stuff. But otherwise, thank you so much, both of you. Grant, thank you again. Beth, Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I will talk to both of you guys very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
And we are back. Man, I know you got a lot of value out of today's episode if you stuck around this long. And first of all, thank you so much for watching the whole episode, because if you're listening to this, that means you watched the whole thing or listened to the whole thing, and it means a ton to me. Now, here's the thing. I've got some stuff for you. First of all, if Beth's story resonated with you and you're sitting there and you would like a little bit higher level of support and accountability, a tailored plan, and someone there for you, someone in your corner, not just cheering you on, but holding you accountable, giving you a plan that is actually going to work for you, and you want to have results just like Beth, you should absolutely apply for coaching. I will leave a link below where you can do that, because that's the thing, is this is what happens inside coaching, is we take people who have been struggling for years and decades and nothing of failure, who come to us, and I'll be honest, as like the last hope. That is a very common thing in our neck of the woods. And I hate that it got to that level of a rock bottom before they found us, but I'm glad they found us nonetheless. And we can do that for so many people. And there's no reason we can't do it with you. And to make it even better, we basically guarantee that we can do it with you if you get accepted into our program. Because that's the beautiful thing, is we don't just accept anyone into coaching with a credit card. You have to apply for coaching. We have to learn more about you. We have to make sure you understand what's about to happen, how the program goes, your questions answered, and you feel good about this too. And then we can talk about potentially seeing about getting something started. So that way it's no sweat, and it's not that big. There's no like second guessing or risk or anything like that, because if it gets to the point where it's like, all right, let's lock arms and do this, it's guaranteed to work. And we put our money where our mouth is. So I'm telling you, it's one of those things where if you're sitting there and this hits home, you really should consider applying for coaching. I'll leave the link down below. And because you're coming from the podcast, I like to reward that, because you guys have a special place in my heart, willing to sit and listen to this whole thing. I'm actually giving away a whole bunch of free stuff to people who apply for coaching, and assuming they get accepted right from the podcast. I have some really cool things for you that you're going to get completely for free, that people have paid a lot of money for, just for because you're coming from the podcast. So I'll leave that link down below. Other stuff down there. If you are not part of my Fat Loss Simplified Facebook community, and you don't have a home base where you can go to get loved on, to get support, to get cheered on by some other people, and to be around people who just get it, where you just have a home base to go to, you should absolutely join. It's totally free. Outside of the podcast, I put some of my best content inside of that group. I'll leave a link down below. If you're not also on the YouTube, you should absolutely join the YouTube and subscribe there, because all the podcast episodes are published on the YouTube. All the interviews with all my amazing guests, though the actual YouTubes are live there, where you can watch the interview. And I've been getting a ton of great feedback on it, and I've been really enjoying pumping it out. And one of my focuses for the new year is to create a lot more YouTube content outside of the podcast. I publish a lot of shorts, I publish a lot of podcast interviews, but I'm also getting ready to start really dropping like what I would call medium form content, like that 4 to 10 minute content mark, if you will. And whatnot. So I also, if you're new to this, I also have a link below where if you're just not quite sure how to get started, if you're not quite sure about like kind of like even from a content perspective, like what I'm about, what kind of, the way that I like to teach, things like that, and you're not quite sure where to get started when it comes to this fat loss game, I have a completely free course you can go through. It's called the Fat Loss Checklist, where I'm just going through these like 5 things that you need to have checked and marked off your boxes to have the best results possible with the least amount of bullshit possible. So that's there as well. Otherwise, I really appreciate you being here and sticking around. It means a ton. I love you, and I will talk to you next time.